Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the John Campea Show here on my YouTube channel. I am, of course, your host, John Campea, and it is an honor and a privilege, as always, to have you guys joining me today. It is, of course, Sunday. I like to do my shows on the weekends at 9 a.m., mostly because I like to get the show done and out of the way so we can all go watch some NFL football a little bit later, and I like to sleep in a little bit, too, on the weekends. Listen, here's how today's show is going to go. I've got 6 topics that I've picked out from emails that you guys have sent in to me. Now, how do you get a topic or a question on the John Campea Show? It's simple. You just email me anytime at john@thejohncampeashow.com. That's john@thejohncampeashow.com. Make sure you put the word topic in the subject line. If you don't put the word topic in the subject line, I'm not going to see your email. And of course, as always, keep those emails to 90 words or less. If they're any longer than that, I don't have time to read them. And even if I wanted to, I couldn't fit them on the screen anyway. Now, once I go through these 6 topics and questions that you guys have emailed into me, I'm going to go over to live questions for the people who are watching the show live. You guys can send in some questions. I'm going to save a little bit of time at the end of the show. How do you get a live question on the show? Maybe see your tweet pop up on the bottom of the screen. Just tweet me at John Campea. Just send out a tweet and start it with at John Campea, and I will get it. And I won't be able to get to all of them, obviously, but I'm going to get through just as many tweets as I can, and maybe you'll see your tweet pop up on the bottom of the screen. All right, guys, with that out of the way, let's go on to question number 1 of the day. And question number 1 is a topic I've discussed before, but with a little bit of a different angle. This one comes to us from Waseem, who writes, "Hi, John. Big fan of your show from South Africa." Well, thank you so much, Waseem. My question to you is, do you prefer watching movies in 2D or 3D? For me, certain movies I feel are enhanced by 3D, like Doctor Strange or The Force Awakens. Keep up the great work and cheers. Well, here's the thing. Now, most people who've watched me for any period of time know that I do not like 3D. I mean, I've mentioned that on the show before. I don't like 3D. I believe it is pretty much a useless gimmick. Most of the time when I go into movies that are 3D, first of all, I'll always avoid them if I can. But if I have to watch a screening in 3D, I find like within the first 2 or 3 minutes, at the most 5 or 10, I just wish I could take the damn glasses off because the novelty's gone. But you do raise an interesting question, though, which is, are there times, because even the things we hate the most, we can acknowledge they probably have their uses here or there. Are there times that even somebody like me, who does not like 3D, are there times that 3D can enhance a movie? Are there times that 3D can be a benefit to a movie? There are times. Like, for instance, let's go back to that awful Jaws movie. Remember Jaws 3D? Going back in the day. Now, that was a movie that was specifically made for 3D because they had a lot of gimmicky 3D stuff in it. I mean, so really, watching the movie not in 3D was almost pointless because that entire movie was designed to be a 3D experiment with the fish heads coming off the screen and hovering over you, like all that kind of stuff. So that movie, Jaws 3D, which is pretty useless in and of itself, but is incredibly useless if you're not watching it in 3D, because it was made to be a 3D experience with a lot of the gimmick and a lot of the schlock in it. But I'm going to be honest with you, movies like Doctor Strange, movies like Avatar, which are both films that I had to see in 3D because of press screenings, that I had to watch both those films in 3D the first time I saw them. And, you know, at first when I'm watching in 3D, I'm like, wow, the 3D in this is really great. The problem is later I watch it not in 3D and I go, oh, I'm not missing out on anything not having it in 3D. The 3D didn't actually add anything to it for me. So it's all like a lot of things when it comes to art and what we use in art, it's all subjective. You know, it's, to me, those things in 3D really don't add anything. Even though I have my criticisms of them, I would be the first to tell you if I thought they added anything, if there was anything positive about it. But for me, no. And I think you're seeing a lot of movie theaters have started to reduce the number of 3D screenings they have because they realize more and more moviegoers are buying their tickets for the non-3D screenings. Thank goodness. Because remember, a couple of years ago, it was getting almost impossible. It was getting really difficult. If you wanted to go see a movie that happened to be in 3D and you wanted to see a non-3D version, I mean, it was getting tricky because they were overloading the 3D screenings because they could charge a higher ticket price for the 3D screenings, right? Now, though, we're finally seeing that coming back into balance. And I don't think, you remember 3D televisions used to be like all the rage, like every TV in Best Buy for a while was a 3D television. Now those are finite, that they're nowhere near as common as they used to be because people just weren't buying them. Thank goodness. Where I think, and I've said this before, when I think 3D will really take off, and maybe somebody like me might learn to appreciate it a little bit more. And again, there may be lots of you who appreciate it already, and that's great. But where 3D might start to pop for me is when they can go glassless 3D. Because you guys have heard me say it's my biggest complaint about 3D, and I have many complaints about 3D, but my biggest complaint about 3D is like some director and cinematographer went through all this energy and effort for years to make these rich, beautiful images on screen, and the first thing we do, put tinted film over our eyes and just desaturate and ruin the image. And I don't care. I've never seen glasses that don't do that. So who knows? Maybe time will come. For me personally, I don't think it adds anything. All right. Thanks a lot for the question, man. Let's move on now to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Trevor Thornley, who writes, now, some people didn't like the fact that Batman killed people in BVS. My issue with Batman killing people is this, is why is Batman killing these henchmen who are just doing their job, but doesn't kill Lex Luthor? He is the one in charge and did create a giant monster to destroy the city. Also, Batman would have killed someone as dangerous as the Joker by now. Do you think they will ever address that? Oh, thanks a lot for the question. And I have addressed the issue of Batman killing, just the plain issue of Batman killing before. I have no problems, zero problems with Batman killing anybody in the movies. Why? Because whereas somebody might go, John, in the comic books, Batman never kills. Well, first of all, you're wrong. I can bring up a laundry list of all the times that Batman has killed people. You just go to one of the newest movies that just came out and one of the most popular graphic novels ever, The Killing Joke, right? The creator just confirmed, a lot of people suspected it, but the creator of The Killing Joke just confirmed that, yes, Batman kills the Joker. He murders him at the end of The Killing Joke. There's a laundry list of times that Batman has killed people. But still, you can say, but John, in the comic books, Batman has a code that he never kills people. That's great. This ain't the comic books. In this movie universe, this Batman has never made such a pledge. So I have zero problem. And I'll be honest with you, I get a little moody when I hear people talking, oh, Batman's a murderer, Batman murders, Batman murders, Batman murders. Well, you know what? Go watch Captain America Civil War again. Do you know how many people the Avengers killed in the first 10 minutes of Captain America Civil War? Where they're doing that mission in Sokovia? Do you know how many people, did you take a body count of how many people the Avengers killed? But you don't hear anybody going, the Avengers are murderers. No, they took out enemy combatants. There were enemy combatants that were trying to kill them, and they took them out in trying to accomplish a mission. And nobody has a problem with that. Nobody has a problem with that. And don't give me this, well, yeah, but John, in the comics, the Avengers never made a pledge not to kill. Yeah. But you're calling what Batman doing murder, but when the Avengers do it, it's not murder. It's perfectly fine. So I hate that double standard with Batman. But the bottom line is, in the movies, this Batman has never made that pledge. So it's completely consistent with this Batman in this universe. But now to the question about, okay, fine, he's killing these henchmen. Then why didn't he kill Lex Luthor? And why hasn't this Batman, like forget the comic books, why hasn't this Batman taken out the Joker yet? Why hasn't he taken out Lex Luthor? And I think the big main reason is this. Batman never, in the movies, never set out to go and kill somebody other than Superman because he thought Superman posed a threat to the entire planet. Like, if any hero, I don't care whether they're for killing or not, if they think, oh, this thing, whether it's a person, a machine, or whatever, this thing could destroy all life on Earth, you kill it. And that's what, at least that was the mindset Batman had going at the time. But when he did kill, like, those henchmen, they weren't just, it wasn't like the henchmen, Batman's walking down the street, I'm Batman. And then he passes a Starbucks and he sees in Starbucks is one of the Joker's henchmen just sitting down having a double mocha latte or whatever you coffee drinkers drink. Just sitting there. And then Batman goes, oh, shoot, I'm going to go in there and kill that guy and pull out his, batarang with a grenade on it, throw it in there and kill the guy. Like, no, he only ever killed people in the movie that he was engaged in mortal combat with. Guys with guns who were trying to kill him or were in the process of posing a threat to the public at large. We never saw Batman in a situation with Lex Luthor in combat. That would have been straight up murder. We have never seen Batman directly in one-on-one combat with the Joker. We haven't seen that yet, except for that one flashback scene in the Suicide Squad. But the Joker just straight up got away, so he never had a chance to take him out. So it's only been with people he's been in direct combat with. So the answer to your question about why didn't he kill Lex Luthor? Why hasn't he killed Joker? Well, because we haven't seen him in life or death combat with those guys, whereas opposed to a number of those henchmen with heavily armed machine gun henchmen, we have, and some of those he took out, just like the Avengers took out a bunch of them in Civil War and other movies. So I got no problem with that. I think that's completely consistent. And guess what? In the movies now, if in Justice League, if this Batman, as a result of his being inspired by Superman, if this Batman decides to now make a pledge that he's not going to kill anymore, I'm fine with that too. I think that's perfectly great. All my point is that up until this point in this movie universe, forget the comics, he has never made that pledge. If he does now, moving forward, fine. But I think it's completely consistent the way it is. All right, anyway, that's just my thought. I know a lot of you guys probably have a lot of very passionate opinions about that. Jump into the comments section and let me know your thoughts. All right, let's move on now to the next topic. And the next topic comes about one of my favorite movies of the year. This one comes to us from my Patreon supporter, Daniel Tickner, who writes, I am curious about what you think the odds are that Baby Driver will be nominated for Best Costumes. All the winners from the past 20 years have either been fantasy or period piece movies, but this movie used costumes very effectively rather than just having abnormal clothes. Well, thanks a lot for the question, Daniel. And since Daniel is a Patreon supporter of mine, let me take my commercial break right now to do my daily shameless plug. You guys know I no longer work for the corporate overlords. I don't work for corporations anymore. I decided to do this on my own. And to do that requires my full time. And in order to do that, it's only possible because of my Patreon supporters. Listen, guys, do me a favor. If you're somebody who likes my programming, and you like the shows I do and you spend any amount of time during the month watching my programming, go check out www.patreon.com/John Campea. Get all the information there about what it means to be one of my Patreon supporters, what being a Patreon supporter, how that helps the shows that I do, as well as some of the benefits of being a Patreon supporter. And after reading all that, if you decide you can be one of my Patreon supporters and be one of the people that makes these shows possible, awesome. If not, that's totally fine too. I'm just glad you're here watching the shows with us. Okay, now with that shameless plug out of the way, let's get back to the question here. The clothing and the outfits in Baby Driver are actually really quite good. I mean, everything from whether you're looking at Baby's outfits, whether you're looking at John Hamm's outfits, whether you're looking at Kevin Spacey's outfit. I mean, all of them looked great. All the characters looked wonderful. What do I think the chances are, though, it could be nominated for Best Costume Design? I'm going to say slim to none. Actually, you know what? Take out slim. I'm going to go none. Now, you mentioned the fact that a lot of the winners in this category for Best Costuming are often period, sci-fi, all that kind of stuff. And I think there's a reason for that. The reason is this. It's the amount of difficulty that then goes into it. Think of it in terms this way, okay? In the Olympics, right? In diving, for example, at least this is the way it used to be. I don't know if it still is today. Speaking of Olympics, remember Cody Miller, a two-time Olympic gold medalist? He's also 1-0 on the Schmodown. I'm really excited. I'll put up some pictures on my social media a little bit later. He's visiting in town, so him and his brand new wife, he got married recently, me and Ann, we're going to go to Halloween Horror Nights tonight over at Universal. I'll put up a bunch of pictures on social media. It's going to be good to get together with him again. But let's go to the other Olympic sport, which is diving, right? Part of the score given in diving is not just how well did you do the dive, part of the score is degree of difficulty. There are other Olympic sports as well that have that as a part of the judging, is degree of difficulty goes into the scores being given. Because if you're an Olympic diver, you can just jump off the board and just do a straight dive, just straight down, like not doing any flips or turns or anything, just go straight down and go perfectly in the water and do that perfectly. And you can do it as well as any human being has ever done it, better than anybody's ever done it. You're not going to win the gold medal. Why? You just did the dive perfectly. Why not win the gold medal? Because there was a very low degree of difficulty. And that has to be taken into consideration. When you're talking about things like costume design, makeup, things like that, I think one of the things that the Academy takes into consideration is degree of difficulty. So while Baby Driver is one of my favorite films of the year, and while the costuming in Baby Driver is great, you have to acknowledge that the degree of difficulty of doing the costume design and getting it right for a movie like Baby Driver is a hell of a lot easier than doing costume design for things like, what was the name of the one that was just out? Something and the City of 1,000 Planets. Why am I forgetting the name of the movie? Because it's so forgettable. Blank and the City of 1,000 Planets. That movie, well, Baby Driver is a much better movie, but that movie, as far as costume design goes, had a much higher degree of difficulty and what had to go into making it happen. So, yes, you're right. It's usually those types of movies that get the Academy Award attention for costume design, but there's a reason for it, and I actually completely agree with the reasoning. So maybe you have a different opinion. Jump into the comments section. Let me know. I can have my mind changed. All right, let's move on now to talk about another one of my favorite movies of the year so far, Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman. And this question comes to us from Andrew Siber, who writes, do the recent comments from Professor Marston's granddaughter about how the director didn't bother to confirm or talk to the family about the real facts change your view of the film? Stay filthy. Well, thanks a lot for the question, man. And look, let me just highlight again. Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman is one of the best movies of the year. It is fantastic. A lot of really interesting insight into how not only one, how the character of Wonder Woman came about, but number two, the life of Professor Marston and his Wonder Woman. I mean, it's subversive. It's different. It's way outside the box. I just adore this. Beautifully acted by everybody involved. I mean, it's wonderful performances, wonderfully directed. It's a magnificent film. I have it as my number 2 or number 3 or number 4 best movie of the year. Logan is, everybody knows, is still my number 1 movie of the year, but it fits right up there. Anyway, so there was some controversy that came up though recently about the granddaughter of Professor Marston came out and said some things like a number of things in the movie are not accurate at all. That this wasn't accurate, and this wasn't accurate. And I've had a bunch of people who know that I love this movie come out to me and say, well, John, does this change your opinion of the movie? Well, there's a couple things to keep in mind. Number one, when it comes to things like this, unless it's a documentary, the purpose of these movies, I've always said this, is not to educate. The purpose of these movies is to entertain. That's why I'm perfectly comfortable with based on a true story. Even if that means you have some creative liberty. Do the things you want to do, that's fine. And yes, it's based on a real story, but I understand that that means it's not going to be 100% historically accurate. If you're a documentary, you've got to be that. If you're a movie that advertises the actual true account of the actual events that actually happened on the actual date with the actual people, then you're painting yourself into a corner, then you better be more historically accurate. But these movies that are based on a true story, I'm fine with them taking liberties because the number one purpose of these people is to make a good movie. Not make a historically accurate movie, is to make a good movie. That's your number one priority. So that's number one. But number two is this, and I have always said this about biopics. The least reliable source of information for a biopic is family. Family is the least reliable. Why? Because family members are the most likely to whitewash the truth. And quite honestly, family members are quite honestly the people who would know the truth the least. Now, if you read up on like how they came about making Professor and the Marston one, they talked to a lot of people that had nothing to lose or gain. Like, as far as family, though, and I'm not saying that the Marston family are liars. I'm not suggesting that at all. What I am saying, though, and I said this about the Jimi Hendrix biopic. I said this about the Richard Pryor biopic. I said this about the Jim Henson biopic or potential biopics, stuff like that, is that you got to be really careful when taking the word of family. Or I've said this before, too, like, I'm not interested in a biopic where family had final decision. A lot of these biopics, the families only sign over the rights to them, to these things, if they get final word in the script and if they get final word and are allowed to cut out stuff, because then it's like, you know what? They're just going to whitewash it. They're just going to whitewash it. And they're going to make sure there's nothing in it that embarrasses the family as it is now. So while I am not suggesting in the least that Marston's granddaughter is lying, I'm not suggesting that at all. What I am suggesting, though, is that quite often family are not the ones that really know the inside story. It's the people who aren't family that often do. Family has a motivation, whether it's conscious or subconscious, to want to whitewash or view the facts in a certain way. I have always considered that family is the least reliable source. Now, so if a filmmaker says, look, we've talked to like 30 different sources and we accumulated all this information and we decided to base our movie on the information we had, not on the families, I'm comfortable with that. I'm fine with that. I also have no problem with the family of Professor Marston expressing their displeasure with it. That's fine too. I have no problem with them doing that as well. But at the end of the day, for me as an audience member, and I can only speak for myself, at the end of the day, I'm fine with filmmakers taking some creative liberties, but I'm also fine with them not taking the final word from the family. Because again, I believe the family members of any subject of any biopic are the most questionable sources that you can actually get things from because they don't have an objective view of it. So you guys may have a different opinion, and that's totally fine too. That's just the way I look at it. And again, I cannot recommend Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman highly enough. It's a wonderful, wonderful film. Regardless of if Professor Marston's granddaughter is correct or incorrect in her statements, it's still one of the best movies of the year, and I highly suggest you check it out. And considering how tiny its box office take is, most of you guys haven't seen it yet, because like nobody's going to see this movie, but it is magnificent. It's one of the gems of the year. All right, let's move on now to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Comic Book Savage, who writes, "Hey, John. With the next two Avengers films being so big in scale, with an estimated budget of $500 million each, do they need to both make $2 billion to be considered successful? As the last two Avengers films made $1.4 and $1.5 billion with a $250 million budget. Also, what do you think the chances of the two films making $2 billion are? Thank you." All right. Well, first of all, I'm really glad you sent in this question because it has been going around in chat board. It's just being spoken about as if it's fact that Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Part 4 are each costing $500 million to make. Let me listen very carefully. Not true. Not true. Nobody from Marvel or Disney has ever said that. Nobody from Marvel or Disney has ever said that. It's also, now that came from, like, there was this one website, good website, one website who did their own extrapolation. It's like, well, the way we figure it, if this, and this, the movie's going to cost $500 million. And also there was a statement that was made by the owner of like some sound stages in England saying, we've got movies here that are shooting now that cost $1 billion. Like that's what they said, but they wouldn't really know. And they could just be using hyperbole. And it's that the point is this: even if my the PR contacts that I have at Disney, even if they called me and said, John, the budget for Avengers Infinity War is $500 million, I still wouldn't believe it. It makes no sense. Here's why. Do you know how much Avengers Age of Ultron cost? With the armies of the Ultron bots and floating cities and Hulk and all the characters and do you know how much that movie cost? Around $270 million. Then, after Avengers Age of Ultron, they did Captain America Civil War. With all of those characters and all of those huge set pieces and all the big airport fight and all that kind of stuff and all their big stars and blah, blah, blah. You know how much money that movie cost? They brought the budget down, and they went down to $250 million, which is still super expensive. There is no way in hell that an Avengers Infinity War is costing double what Captain America Civil War cost. There is no way Avengers Infinity War is going to cost nearly double of what Avengers Age of Ultron done. Especially considering, while, Ike Perlmutter doesn't have his hands on the purse strings anymore, Disney is still traditionally rather frugal. They've opened up the bank on a couple of occasions, but they're a traditionally rather frugal company. They don't like just throwing money around like it's going out of style. And the fact of the matter is this, is you're not wrong. If they made Avengers Infinity War for $500 million, then you would be looking at a scenario where you would have to be getting close to a $2 billion box office just to be profitable. Considering no Marvel movie has come close to $2 billion yet, that would make the executives over at Disney world-class morons. Let's see, you're budgeting this film, putting yourself in a position where you pretty much need to get to $2 billion just to kind of break even, make a little bit of money, when the most profitable movie you've had has been way short of that, like $1.5 billion? Are you crazy? That would make them world-class idiots. World-class idiots. So no, I do not believe for one moment, not for one single moment, should anybody believe these things that the movie's costing $500 million. Now, if you want to say that the movie's going to cost $500 million, and that includes prints, and that includes marketing, and that includes back ends, and that includes this, and includes that, and includes the sixth, and includes the seventh thing. If you want to say that the movie, when it's all said and done, all together is going to come in around $500 million, which is not how we talk. Those aren't the terms we talk about when we talk about production budgets. We always talk about production budgets just in the term of the production budget. If you want to make the argument that maybe it'll cost $500 million all together, including P&E, including marketing, including all of that stuff, maybe. And then you're not in a position where you need to make $2 billion. You need to make about $1 billion to be profitable, which Avengers Age of Ultron or Avengers Infinity War will do no problem. If you want to talk like that, but that's not the terminology we always use when we're talking about how much does a movie cost to make. When we ever ask the question, how much did that movie cost to make, we're always talking in terms of production budget. P&E, marketing, back ends, all that stuff is always numbers we add on later. So if you want to make the argument that maybe with all of it included is $500 million, that's fine. But that's a totally different topic then. It's a totally different issue. There is no way the production budget on Marvel's Avengers Infinity War is $500 million. There's just no way. There's no way Kevin Feige would allow it. There's no way Ike Perlmutter would allow it, even though he's not connected to the movie side anymore. There's no way, the most important thing is there's no way Bob Iger, the head czar and grand emperor of Disney, there is no chance in hell that Bob Iger would approve that. He's not going to let an Avengers movie, which is not going to make as much money as Star Wars The Last Jedi, by the way. There's no way that Bob Iger is going to approve an Avengers movie have twice the budget of a Star Wars episodic movie when Star Wars is pretty much guaranteed to make more money than the Avengers movie. So yes, no, don't believe those reports, blah, blah, blah. Who knows? Maybe Bob Iger is going to hold a press conference tomorrow and say, you know what? I just decided it's only money. Let's spend $500 million. And maybe I'm wrong, but there's no chance in hell. I just do not believe it for a second. Okay, anyway, I've gone on long enough on that. Let's now move on to the final email question of the day, and then I'm going to go to your live questions. You can start sending your live questions now. Once again, if you're watching live, tweet to me at John Campea. And while you're at it, make sure you're following me at John Campea on Twitter. But start tweeting in your questions. I will get through as many of those as I possibly can. Okay, now before we get to those tweets, let's go to the final email question of the day. And the final email question of the day comes to us from Sharif Snuggs, who writes, can we safely say that the Dark Universe is now officially done with. I heard nothing from this shared monster verse since The Mummy. After Dracula Untold failed, and now Cruise's Mummy movie doing no better, I can't imagine getting a new film anytime soon or ever. I would love to hear your thoughts. So thanks a lot for the question, Sharif. And yeah, look, it's an interesting thing. I am one of the critics. I'm one of the few ones that I didn't hate The Mummy. I thought the upside of The Mummy slightly outweighed the bad side of The Mummy. And the Mummy has a lot of problems. No doubt, The Mummy has a lot of problems. But I thought there was enough positive stuff in there that I walked out going, you know what? Yeah, okay, I was entertained. Not like Geostorm. Geostorm, which was horrible. But, I walked out of The Mummy going, there was enough upside in The Mummy that I ended up, I had a good time. I had a good time with The Mummy. And not a great time, not one of the top 20 films of the year, nothing like that. I just didn't think it was horrible. Now, it's also really interesting to hear a lot of these people talk about how badly it bombed. That it just completely bombed. Well, that's not true. Let's put this a little bit into perspective for a second, okay? So let's look at Blade Runner 2049. Okay, I'm just going to bring up the numbers here because I didn't have them right in front of me. Okay, Blade Runner 2049 cost a reported $170 million to make. Some reports say as low as $150 million. Some reports are saying about $170 million, okay? That movie right now worldwide, and it's been open for a number of weeks, has made $194 million. On a $150 to $170 million budget, Blade Runner 2049 has made about $194 million. That is a bomb. That's a bomb. Now, let's go to The Mummy. The Mummy, if I remember correctly, cost significantly less than Blade Runner. It cost about $125 million to make, was their budget on that. The Mummy has made over $400 million worldwide. That puts it into the category, can you say it's successful? No, you probably can't say it's successful at $400 million. But you can safely say it's not a bomb. The Mummy did not bomb. You can't make $400 million. Almost like, almost quadruple your production budget. Let's at minimum over 3 times your production budget. You can't say it's a bomb at that point. Blade Runner is a bomb. This, I should say, is not a bomb. It just wasn't a bomb. Made $400 million. However, you also then got to take into consideration the critic response and the audience response. And even though I thought the movie was okay at best, most of the critics did not like it at all. A lot of the audience did not like it at all. So you marry that with the fact that it didn't make $600 million worldwide, and you've got a problem. Could the Dark Universe, could this whole experiment be completely finished at this point? You know what? It's possible. It is possible. Just a little over a month ago, Corden, the guy who's going to be directing the next installment of the Dark Universe, which was The Bride of Frankenstein, that was going to be the next one. And you had Javier Bardem was going to be in it, and they were talking about Angelina Jolie was going to be in it, and she was going to be the Bride of Frankenstein, all this kind of talk. And just up to a little over a month ago, the director of the film was saying, oh no, we're still going. We're on schedule. We're making this movie. Yay! Then just a few days after that, this is at the beginning of this month, I believe. Just a few days after that, Universal put out this statement, and Universal said the following. After thoughtful consideration, Universal Pictures and director Bill Condon have decided to postpone Bride of Frankenstein. None of us want to move too quickly to meet a release date when we know this special movie needs more time to come together. Bill is a director whose enormous talent has been proven time and time again, and we all look forward to continuing to work on this film together. That is PR spin. If I've got my Universal Translator on, like from Star Trek, and I read that out loud, the Universal Translator is saying, we completely botched this Dark Universe thing, and we are giving up on it. Like, that's what I hear. Look, they're saying, oh, we're just delaying it to give us more time. I think they're giving themselves more time just to reevaluate their whole Dark Universe plan at this, because the public has not responded to it. Not only did the public not respond to the Mummy movie, The public has not responded to their plan. Like Bride of Frankenstein, who was asking for another Bride of Frankenstein movie? The Invisible Man, who's asking for a new Invisible Man? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm intrigued by them. I think like Johnny Depp playing the Invisible Man could be really cool. I think seeing more of Russell Crowe, one of the greatest actors in the world, playing more Dr. Jekyll could be really cool. I mean, there's lots of potential, but let's face it, nobody in the public was asking for an Invisible Man movie. Nobody in the public was asking for a Bride of Frankenstein movie. They might have been asking for a werewolf movie, a Wolfman movie. Could have done. They should have followed up with that. Maybe another kick at the can at Dracula or something along those lines, but nobody was asking for it. Look, I got to admit, I am not a tinfoil hat on the head kind of guy, but I got to say, for those of you who are thinking that the Dark Universe may be done, I don't think you're crazy for thinking that. I still think they're not done with it. I do think Universal is completely reevaluating where they're at with their Dark Universe films. And they may end it. I don't think they're done, though. I think they're going to take another kick, but I do not think you are crazy at all if you think that they're done with this altogether. I do not think you're crazy if Universal has decided, well, we took a swing at it and we struck out. Let's move on. Let's focus more on the spin-off movies for Fast and the Furious, which have been very profitable and they've done a pretty good job with. So maybe that's where their heads are at right now, but it's possible. It's possible that the Dark Universe stuff could be completely done by this point. All right, guys, I said I would save a little bit of time near the end of the show to take your live questions for those of you who are watching this live. And we're going to do this right now. And I'm going to start going over to Twitter. And I'm not going to, I don't have time to really screen these. So whatever pops up is what's going to pop up. Let's go. First question today comes to us on Twitter from Dia Knight, who writes, John, what is your sweet spot budget for a AAA blockbuster film? It depends on the film. Completely depends on the film. Honestly, I don't think any movie should cost more than $200 million. I really don't think that. And that should be rare. I think there is a systematic problem in Hollywood for them overspending. And if you've heard me talk about this before, I'm going to do an entire, probably 15-minute video on this sometime. But there is a systemic problem in Hollywood with the over-budgeting of movies directly affects how much you and I pay for a movie ticket. Don't ever, when I'm always go a little bit crazy when I complain about how much money they spend on making movies. And I inevitably have people tweet to me going, John, why do you care? It's not your money they're spending. Yes, it is. Because you know where they get that money from to spend those ridiculous budgets? From your movie ticket price and from my movie ticket price. And when I go to my local AMC Burbank 16, one of the best theaters in the country, granted, and just for a normal screening, not 3D, not in the AMC Prime, just a normal Wednesday night movie, I got to pay $16 for a movie ticket, $20 or more if I want to see it in 3D or in a Prime theater. When I'm spending $16, don't look at me and say, John, why do you care what they spend? It's not like it's your money. Yeah, it is. It is my money and it's your money because the way they justify going completely outrageous with their spending on these movies is simple. Let's just increase the price of movie tickets across the country. That pays for it. There we go. So you do pay for it and so do I. And anyway, when you can make a movie like District 9, okay? When you can make a movie like District 9 for $30 million, a visual effects heavy movie for $30 million, I'm not saying you can make Justice League for $30 million. I'm not saying you can make Avengers for $30 million, but don't tell me you need $250 million. You don't. When you can make Deadpool for $50 million, granted, not a super visual effects heavy movie, but there are definitely some big set pieces in that movie. When you can do that for 50, don't tell me you need 5 times the money that you absolutely need 5 times the money to make a comparable blockbuster film. You don't. We're not ever going to see movie ticket prices go down until Hollywood gets a handle on the outrageous spending that they do on these movies. Anyway, so I think the sweet spot for an absolute AAA blockbuster film, I'm thinking is $200 million. $200 million would be the absolute cap limit for me, but that's just me. All right, what's next? The next tweet comes to us from Mr. Yasman300 who writes, John, what should Fassbender do to save his career? Should he go back to do smaller films like Shame, Slow West, and Macbeth? Well, look, here's the interesting thing about Michael Fassbender. And, I said the other day that Michael Fassbender hasn't done a really great film that didn't have an X at the beginning of it since Shame. A bunch of people reminded me about 12 Years a Slave, and that's definitely one of them. Although that really was more Chiwetel Ejiofor's movie than his. Still, Michael Fassbender was in it, and he was fantastic in it, and that does count. So, but Michael Fassbender, while he is one of the best actors where nobody is questioning Michael Fassbender's talent, he makes damn questionable decisions about the movies he appears in. And it's to the point now that I am going to, it's questionable whether I go run out to rush and see the next Michael Fassbender movie. Like The Snowman was awful. Assassin's Creed, terrible. He's been in a number of movies that have just been bottom-feeding gutter garbage. And he always gives a good performance in it. I'm not saying I'm going to kind of lean away from Michael Fassbender movies because of his talent. Not at all. He's an amazing talent. But it's because, Michael Fassbender doesn't know a good script if it bit him in the ass. So if he's appearing in a movie, I got to wonder if it's a good script or not. I mean, I feel terrible saying that. But he's just a world-class talent who's appearing in world-class garbage lately. Oceans, A Light Between Oceans is another one. Oh, God, that movie sucked. And I'm getting tired of seeing this dude waste his world-class talent in these awful movies because either he or his representation have terrible decision-making abilities when it comes to which movies to be in. But look, honestly, because he is such a world-class talent, and because he is such a good actor, his career is not in trouble. So when you ask, what does he need to do to save his career? Nothing, because his career isn't in trouble right now. Everybody knows that if you put Michael Fassbender in your movie is going to be better than it would have without him. It's not going to make a garbage movie a good movie. But instead of a level 100 garbage movie, if you put Michael Fassbender in it, maybe it'll be a level 94 garbage movie. You know what I mean? Everybody in Hollywood knows your movie will be better if you put Michael Fassbender in it. That hasn't changed. So I don't believe Michael Fassbender is going to be hurting at all for roles or anything like that. He's still good. If he continues to roll out another 2 or 3 garbage movies that he decides to appear in, maybe that discussion changes. But as of right now, I think Michael Fassbender's career is perfectly fine. He's not in any trouble right now. Let's try this. Rockfan180 writes, John, isn't it surprising that we haven't gotten sequels to Elf, Talladega Nights, or Old School yet? Would you look forward to them? Elf? No, I wouldn't look forward to Elf. I like Elf, but I think that story is completely closed off. I think that story's done. Talladega Nights? No, because that's probably one of my least favorite movies that Will Ferrell has done is Talladega Nights, so not that. Old School's great, but again, I think you've gone as far as you can with those characters. I'm not even talking about the story. I'm talking about the characters. I think you took those characters as far as you can go, and if you did them again, it's not like, say, The Hangover, where even though Hangover 2 and 3 were not all that great, I would be up for a Hangover 4 because I don't think they ran out of things with the characters. I would still just hang out with those characters and watch those characters if they decided to do another one. The Old School, I think that movie is great. But I also think if you did another Old School, I think the shtick of those characters and their context and their situation would be way worn off. And I don't think there's anywhere to go with that. So that's just my opinion. You guys may think completely differently. All right, let's try this one. Nathan Vandor writes, John, favorite action movie star? Oh, that's easy. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold is also the star. You know, for those of you, let's see on the chat board if you guys can guess this before I actually say the answer. I've mentioned this before on 1 or 2 shows. So some of you, but I don't think I've mentioned it recently at all. It's been a long time. Who of you know what my absolute favorite action film of all time is? What is my all-time favorite action film? Do any of you guys know on the live chat board? I'm keeping an eye on it. There's a bit of a delay, so I'm going to give the answer here before I see what the answers come up. But the answer is, and I wonder if any of you guys will have gotten this, is True Lies. True Lies is my all-time favorite action film. It's a great mixture of the humor and the action and great lead characters. It is simply, and a bunch of you did know it. I'm seeing in True Lies pop a bunch. Good for you guys. You guys remember. That's awesome. True Lies, as far as the action genre goes, True Lies is a masterpiece. I know sometimes the word masterpiece is overused, but of the action genre, True Lies, I believe, is the gold standard. And how great was the rest in peace Bill Paxton in that? Bill, I got a tiny penis. I mean, Bill Paxton was gold. Absolute gold. Tom Arnold, who is pretty much useless in anything. Tom Arnold could have got a Best Supporting Actor Academy Award nomination as far as I'm concerned for that. You know what she probably needs the money for? An abortion. He's so good in that. Everybody was... Jamie Lee Curtis. How amazing is Jamie Lee Curtis in that movie? Taya Correa. Look, one of the most beautiful women in the history of Hollywood. How good was she in that? That movie is just dynamite. Anyway, I know you're asking me about my all-time favorite action hero. Well, considering Arnold is the star of my all-time favorite action film, and then you're talking about movies like whether you're talking about Commando, or you're talking about Running Man, or you're talking about Conan, or you're talking about even Twins, or you're talking about whatever you want to talk about. Arnold Schwarzenegger is it. Now, The Rock is probably the new Arnold Schwarzenegger. The Rock is like that guy with all the charm, all the charisma, the big physical presence. He's got all the tools. But as of right now, for me, it's still that. A lot of people will say maybe Jean-Claude Van Damme, which would be, I've got no argument with you if you want to say Jean-Claude. A lot of people say Sylvester Stallone. I've got no argument with you if you want to say Sylvester Stallone. Chuck Norris, Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan. There's so many great names that you could put out there. For me, though, it's going to have to be Arnold. So I'm going to go Arnold on that. All right, let's move on to the next Twitter question. And this one comes to us from Tosi, who writes, John, what % do you think studios should cut their movie budgets to create cheaper movies? Well, I just think they should create, like sports leagues have a salary cap. I think the movie studios should come together and say, look, we need to police ourselves. We need to keep ourselves in line. Let's create a cap. We make an agreement to police ourselves for the health of the industry, for the good of the industry. And we all agree across the board, no movie can be over $200 million. Start there. I think if you start there, you're off to a good start. And I think you'd start forcing studios to make better decisions, and we'll see where we go. Okay, next one comes to us from Nicola Lau 1, who writes, John, I know Marvel have already filmed a couple SL cameos. Honestly, I don't. Are you talking Stan Lee? Okay, Stan Lee cameos. How does that work? Do they film the scenes around they already filmed cameos for? Well, I mean, I'm not really sure, but you can come up with some very safe generic scenarios. For instance, his cameo in the one Spider-Man movie where he's just sitting on. Was it a Spider-Man movie? I think it was a Spider-Man movie where he's just sitting on a bus. You could take that and then drop that in any Marvel movie, just change what's outside the window of the bus, right? So I'm sure a couple of the cameos that he's already filmed are probably like very safe, generic settings like that they can just take and drop in. He's got a really good cameo in Thor Ragnarok, so keep your eye open for Stan in that. But I think they just filmed some safe, generic ones, and then I think they're good. Okay, let's see. Next one comes to us from Manusin 3999973. John, hey John, can Justice League cross 1.5 billion? Okay, there are two separate questions there. Can it cross 1 billion? Will it cross 1 billion? Can it? Yes, I believe it can. It's going to require some help though, because you're talking about coming close to doubling what Batman versus Superman made. A couple of things need to happen. Number one, the critic response. Remember, that's the early buzz that comes out. The critics are the ones who see it first. Critics have to like it. They have to like it almost, not as much, but they have to like it almost on the same level that they liked Wonder Woman. It doesn't have to be 100% on Rotten Tomatoes or anything like that, but it's got to be positive. Okay? It's got to be positive. If the critic response comes out lukewarm, no chance in hell Justice League crosses 1.5 billion. Okay? No chance. I think it will be positive. And I know that's a bit of a leap of faith, but I believe it will be positive. I've said this before, I will say it again. I believe Justice League will be over 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. I believe it'll be over 70%. Remember, 2 months before Wonder Woman came out, I predicted that Wonder Woman would be the first DCEU movie to be over 75% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it did. I'm predicting Justice League will be over 70. I'm not quite willing to say 75, but I'm going to predict over 70. If it is, and I might be wrong, but if it is over 70, then it's got a chance. It's got a chance. Aside from critics having the early response, and it's got to have that, it's got to be good enough that people not only want to come back and watch it multiple times, they want to come back and bring friends with them that haven't seen it yet. If it can do those things, it does have a shot at 1.5. Will it hit 1.5? I don't think so. I don't think so. But here's the thing. I don't want anybody out there to think, well, if it doesn't hit $1.5 billion, it's a failure. Give me a break. If it makes $900 million, that's a big success. And that puts money in Warner Brothers' pockets. And that's what this is all about, is making money. And that works. If it makes $1 billion, that puts money in their pockets. I do believe it'll make $1 billion, but 1.5 is a tall order. Because 1.5, you're talking about now in the neighborhood of the most successful comic book movie of all time. And it's just that Justice League is coming off a divisive Batman versus Superman. It's coming off a divisive Man of Steel, even though that movie's awesome. Wonder Woman worked. Awesome. Great. That's a step in the right direction. But Justice League has some baggage it's bringing along with it. To expect it to hit 1.5 billion is a real stretch. I think it's a stretch. And I think that's an unfair expectation. We shouldn't expect that from Justice League. I think we should set our goal for real success around the $900 million mark. Because if it makes $900 million, that means it exceeded what Batman versus Superman made. And I think we should count that as a win. And then move on from that. And then maybe the next one can make $1.5 billion. It just seems like a tall order right now to want $1.5 billion from a Justice League movie right now. I think that's unfair. It's an unrealistic expectation, but it's possible. It is possible. Okay, let's try this next one. I'll take just a few. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize how long I've gone. Oh well. Okay, whatever. We're having fun here today. Let's see. Oh, it didn't come up yet. Let's try it again. Okay. Mujtaba 26397 writes, John, when will Avatar's box office record be broken? And do you think there is any upcoming film which has a shot at doing that? Nope. I don't see anything that's going to break it. Look, let me bring up the all-time box office number here. Because I know that right now Avatar is still the all-time box office record, okay? I believe second place might be The Force Awakens. No, Titanic is still number 2. Okay. So Avatar is the all-time box office worldwide record. It is almost at $2.8 billion. Okay. Do you know what's come closest to that in the last 20 years? Star Wars The Force Awakens, which made $2 billion. That's $800 million, or almost $800 million short of what Avatar made. 800 million short. Most movies, 99% of movies never make $800 million, let alone make an additional $800 million. There is nothing right now, or in the foreseeable future, I see catching Titanic. Or maybe something will catch Titanic, because Titanic's at $2.1 billion, almost 2.2. Maybe something can catch Titanic. Maybe Star Wars The Last Jedi will catch Titanic. I don't think Star Wars The Last Jedi will make $2 billion. I think Star Wars Last Jedi will make like 1.8 billion, something like that. But that's another discussion for another time. But no, honestly, I can't see anything catching Star Wars or catching Avatar anytime soon. I just don't see it happening. The number is just way too astronomical. Let's see. This one comes from Gutland. Guttaland 313 writes, John, what movie was the biggest stinker in history to you? Well, look, I've got my Trinity. My holy trinity of the 3 worst, and I'm sure there's some smaller indie films that were worse, but as far as big budget, wide release Hollywood films, the trinity, the holy trinity of the 3 worst in history are Battlefield Earth, Catwoman, and Highlander 2. That is my holy trinity of the worst wide release box office of all time. films. There have been some others that have come close. And maybe I should add a fourth to make a Mount Rushmore. Instead of a trinity, I should make a Mount Rushmore of the worst films of all time. What would be that fourth film to go up there with those three legendarily awful movies? I'd have to think about it. But those are the ones that are the biggest to me. All right, I'm going to take one more, even though today's show has gone way over time. Let's see. This one is Rishish 1728-1601 writes, John, if both of them are available, who should direct Justice League sequel between Snyder and Whedon? Snyder is not available. Snyder will not be working on a DC movie again. I'll just tell you that right now. And who would I have on it? I would have Whedon. Why? That's not a knock on Zack Snyder. Everybody knows I'm a Zack Snyder fan. I've gotten together with Zack Snyder. I've spoken in person with Zack Snyder on a number of occasions. I like Zack Snyder very much. I think his movie, The Owls of Ghoul, is one of the most underrated animated films I've ever seen. I think Zack Snyder's great, and everybody knows how much I love Man of Steel. But it's the same thing I've said with Christopher Nolan. It's the same thing I said with Sam Raimi on the Spider-Man films. It's the same thing I say with all the time. Snyder, as a creative filmmaker, I don't believe creative filmmakers should stay on one property for too long. And I believe Snyder has just flat out stayed on one property too long. I believe staying on one property too long eventually saps out your creativity. I think we saw that happen with Sam Raimi on the Spider-Man films. I think we saw that starting to happen with even the great Christopher Nolan on the Batman films. Because The Dark Knight was the best one, but The Dark Knight Rises, whatever the third one was called, I'm forgetting now. Even people who love all three will probably acknowledge that was the weakest one. Because he stayed on one property for too long. And Christopher Nolan was smart enough to do other films in between each Batman film. Like he would do a Batman film, then do a different film. Do a Batman film, do a different film. So he kept himself kind of fresh that way. So for the same reasons that I think the Russo brothers should get out of Marvel, even though they've done a great job so far, I think they should get out of Marvel business once the second Avengers film is done. I think it's time for Zack Snyder to move on for his own sake, for his own creativity. Get his creative juices going on other creative projects and that. So, but Whedon, sure, he's just doing Justice League right now. Let's see what he does next after that. He's got a couple more films he could do, but I think it's time for Zack Snyder to move on. All right, guys, that will do it for me for this installment of the John Campea Show. Thank you so much for joining me. Listen, don't forget, if you're here and you haven't done so already, take a second, click on that subscribe button, become a subscriber to my YouTube channel. Once again, check out patreon.com/John Campea. Get the information about why it's important for me to have Patreon supporters, and maybe you can be a Patreon supporter of mine. And make sure you're following me on social media, simply on Facebook and on Twitter, just at John Campea. That will do it for me for today, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. My name's John Campea, and until tomorrow, bye-bye.